Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is OSINT, or OSINT. It stands for Open Source Intelligence. It's the vehicle which should have been used all across the board with regard to pollsters to monitor trends in this past election. OSINT would have gotten things right. In fact, those who use OSINT had a much more realistic sense of what was happening and were better predictors of the election results than the many companies that did not make use of the service. Open source intelligence is the polar opposite of covert intelligence. Covert intelligence uses secret and often illegal tools to investigate and fulfill their objectives. Covert intelligence is sexy. Open source is more mundane. It uses legal means and culls through already existing material on the net and social media. OSINT is not just relegated to elections. OSINT is used to predict markets, commodities, stocks, and just about all other essential behavior. It is the most important vehicle around for obtaining open source information, and when used properly, OSINT holds the answers to almost every question asked and answered. The old polls, the polls that most companies use to obtain the numbers and information concerning the 2016 presidential election, are from the Jurassic Age. Almost all ancient pollsters still rely heavily on landline phone calls, and they place those calls between the hours of 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. during the dinner hour. Everyone between the ages of 16 and 60 knows immediately just how biased and skewed the answers must be given the method. Based on these qualifiers, that alone, the entire system should have been disqualified, period. In this day and age, how many people have landlines and can compose a decent polling sample at least? And of those who have landlines, how many actually are at home to answer the phones? And if at home, how many actually answer landlines? Once upon a time, there was a valid criticism of the 5 to 7 p.m. polling call. Critics used to say that a very important swath of American families in a cross-section of America refused to answer the phone during the traditional dinner hour. That's hard to process in this day and age, but it was the proper social convention not to answer the phone during the dinner hour. The pollster had to thread the needle between families sitting down and getting up from the table between 5 and 7 p.m. That was then. If it was awkward then, what should we say about now? This method continues to fail. And yet, for some unexplained reason, people still place value on it. The math is correct. The collection data is totally skewed. The substance of the material that pollsters receive and upon which pundits base their commentary was simply not reflective of reality. The United States is not alone in dragging their feet in embracing OSINT. During the course of the last elections in Israel, polls predicted that incumbent Netanyahu would lose. He won. The UK got it wrong too. With the Brexit vote, David Cameron paid the price and his career came to an abrupt close. There were two successful polls in the presidential election this past run, the USC LA Times Daybreaker poll and the Mog-IA poll, also pronounced Mog-IA. They succeeded where all others failed because their surveys reflected current trends, and that is why they will succeed again in the future. They bucked the tide, cast off old methods, and embraced the new world we live in. The USC LA Times Daybreaker poll was called an outlier. It had Donald Trump up over Hillary for months. On the day of the vote, they had Trump up winning by 3%. Across the board, the other polls had Clinton up by 6%. They did it by calling cell phones and by varying the time of the calls and by using a sample that was at least double the size of the other polls. According to their website, they came back to the same group constantly every week, asking them the same questions. The Mog-IA is a company that makes predictions based on computer algorithms. It was created by Sanjeev Ray, an Indian computer scientist and innovator. Mog-IA did an analysis that determined that Trump was 25% more popular than Barack Obama was in 2008. Wray utilized OSINT and never asked a single question of a single voter, but he got it right. In Trump versus Clinton, MOG-IA used AI, or artificial intelligence, to scour the internet, to catch keywords and phrases. Their program was also focused on search engine requests. It focused on chains, on links, on posts, on tweets. It gathered information and comments from the comments section on articles. MOG-IA uses millions of data points, including Google, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. And from those points of information, computers gave them assessments and predictions that turned out to be reliable and accurate. Sanjeev put together an excellent model for this election, a model that can and should be replicated. OSINT should not be the wave of the future. It should be a go-to tool right now for thoughtful analysis and surveys on every issue. As a famous pollster once told me, polls don't lie, people do. Computer-generated OSINT don't know how to lie. I've also been thinking about another issue. The most worrisome byproduct of Russia's involvement in Syria is that Russia's very presence has emboldened Assad. About that, there can be no doubt. Russia now occupies a prominent place at the center of the theater of Syrian operations. That presence has given Assad the confidence he needs to act with purpose and strength. Assad is now confident enough to admit that the situation enveloping his country and devastating his countrymen is dangerous. He is saying things that he would never dare to say or utter until now. The worry is that because of this newfound arrogance, Assad may end up attacking Israel. The attack would be retaliation for Israel's missile strike at an Air Force base just outside of Damascus. Israel's alleged strike, that's the proper diplomatic term, alleged strike, was true to form. Israel has neither confirmed nor denied this attack or any other of its operations. This policy is in place especially for situations like this. The target was just west of Damascus, more specifically a base, an Air Force base housing weapons of mass destruction that Syria was preparing to hand off to Hezbollah. The general rule is that Israel does not take sides in the Syrian conflict. When Israel does conduct a strike, either in Lebanon or Syria, it does for one of two reasons. Either to stop the transfer of weapons that could change the balance of power in the region, or to put a halt to the activity that would allow Hezbollah to significantly improve their weapons cache. Destroying WMDs on their way to Hezbollah falls into both categories. Weapons of mass destruction in the possession of Hezbollah would not only alter the status of Hezbollah, it would alter the regional playing field. And so, allegedly, Israel launched the successful missile attack. Damascus and Assad could have ignored the attack, but they've done that in the past. But instead, the military could have reported the attack to the press as an accidental explosion. But this time, Syria publicly responded. This time, official Syrian media reported the attack as a surface-to-surface missile shot, or series of missiles, shot from Israel into Syria. Perhaps Assad was calling Israel out, using the attack as his statement about it as a public relations device. The official reports might have been paving the way for Syrian president to justify his actions when, according to his own timetable, he strikes Israel. On the flip side, Israel's non-committal policy could be a vehicle to allow Assad a way out and to help him save face. Some people might ask, why Israel used these surface-to-surface missiles in the first place, when their cost is 3 to 4 times more expensive than an ordinary missile fired from a jet fighter. They both achieve the same goal. This too involves Russia, because Russia has moved their S-300 and S-400 anti-aircraft weapons into place in Syria. These highly sophisticated defensive weapons are in place. Had Israel simply sent their fighter jets, it's entirely possible that the Russians would have locked onto them. Surface-to-surface missiles can safely be shot from Israel into Syria, literally flying under the radar. Standard Israeli jets would have been spotted, and the Russians may have passed that information to the Syrians in time for them to scatter and avoid being destroyed. Syria knows that Russia has not given them a carte blanche. Assad is free to deal with the rebels and the terrorists as he sees fit. In other areas, he needs to tread more carefully. Russia most definitely does not want direct conflict with Israel. However, Russia, especially military officers in the field, might be very interested in determining Israel's preparedness in case of attack. Israel's readiness would certainly be measured if Syria or Hezbollah were to attack. Some kind of Syrian retaliation is in the planning stages. We know that. And political leadership in the Kremlin might need plausible deniability, just like they had to have in March 2015, after Russian MiGs locked onto Israeli jets. At that time, Putin explained it away, telling Netanyahu that Moscow had no idea that such tensions were in the air. And Syria is probably counting on the help of Hezbollah when they do attack Israel. Israel is certainly preparing for that eventuality. The big question is not when, it's not where, it's not how. The big question is with the help of Russia or without. Will the Syrian attack on Israel be sanctioned by Russia, aided by Russia, or even planned by Russia? Let's hope the answer to these questions is a resounding no. Coming up next, points of view. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. First up is from Ynet News, the English online edition of Yediot Achronot, and this was actually written in Hebrew and translated into English. It's entitled Tunisia Assassination, Yossi Cohen's Baptism of Fire. It was published on Monday, December 19th, 2016, and is authored by Ronen Bergman. Bergman is an excellent writer and thinker. He's an analyst as well as an investigative reporter. His expertise is security and Middle East affairs. He's written at least 2 books about the Mossad, Israel's clandestine organization. In this piece, he provides analysis asking if the Mossad is indeed behind the assassination of Hamas aviation engineer Mohammed al-Zawahiri in Tunisia. This is the first assassination attributed to the Israeli intelligence organization under the new Mossad chief, Yossi Cohen's leadership. He begins, "All-out battle is the name of the game. Our job is to subtract strategic abilities from our enemies, abilities which may harm the future and well-being of Israel's citizens. When we have to, we must target the enemies themselves, but only when the use of assassination is only part of an overall strategy which includes means and tools as well." These words, according to a person who just recently retired from the Mossad, were used by the organization's director, Yossi Cohen, to present his doctrine in a conversation he held after taking office in early 2016. If Mossad is indeed behind the assassination of Hamas aviation engineer Mohammed al-Zawahiri in Tunisia, as reported by the foreign press, this is the first assassination attributed to the Israeli intelligence organization under Cohen's leadership. Or perhaps the second. Omer Zaid of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine died under mysterious circumstances in Bulgaria. Now Bergman exposes the chain of command, saying that if it was the Mossad, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu certainly signed off on the operation. He continues, if the Mossad was indeed behind the assassination, Cohen and his people surely presented Prime Minister Netanyahu, who has experienced many disappointments, with a plan that satisfied him both regarding the performance and, as importantly, the assassin's escape. The people arrested in Tunisia were likely not involved and will be released soon. Then Bergman gives a little history, quoting from a previous head of the Mossad about operations and their role. This gives pretty good insight into the clandestine organization's point of view and perspective. Meir Dagan brought into the Mossad an extensive operational spirit, which assassinations were probably part of, but not the only thing. He ascribed great importance, for example, to combining efforts with the United States to prevent Iran from importing critical parts for its nuclear project. An average vehicle has 25,000 parts. It's enough to make sure that the company manufacturing it cannot get hold of some of them, not all, just a few parts, and the car will not drive, Dagan would say. On the other hand, he would smile. Sometimes the most effective thing is to kill the driver, and that's it. At this point, Bergman gives an explanation of the value of these assassinations. Most importantly, it allows for the powerful reputation of the Mossad. As former Prime Minister Menachem Begin used to say, it's the long reach of justice. An operation in such a distant arena like Tunisia, against the person who most probably knew that he was under some sort of threat, and in a world filled with cameras and biometric systems, is very dangerous and must only be carried out against a principled target, a target whose removal will clearly cause the rival considerable damage. There is a symbolic value as well. The Mossad engages in a lot of operations, and contrary to its image, it's not an organization that focuses on killing people. Nonetheless, there is nothing like such assassination operations, to intensify its intimidating image. Bergman concludes by simply saying what the Mossad hopes every enemy of Israel is thinking. We will find you. In essence, there is no safe haven on earth for you to plot to attack Israel. Even if you succeed, Israel's long arm of justice will reach you. Sometimes the message concealed in the assassination is as important as making the target, in this case, an engineer helping a terror organization, non-functional. Israel's enemies, wherever you are, we will find and kill you. Throughout the years, these actions created the myth around the Mossad's name and long arm as an aggressive and merciless organization. That's not bad for an intelligence organization, which sees the goal of deterrence before its eyes just as much as it sees the goal of prevention. Bergman gives a powerful presentation and an articulate point of view on the Mossad. Second up is a column from Israel National News, also known as Arutz Sheva. It was published on December 18, 2016, and is by Mordechai Kedar. The piece is entitled Islamic State Limited. Islamic State volunteers will soon be unemployed. Dr. Mordechai Kedar is a senior lecturer in the Department of Arabic at Bar-Ilan University. He served in the IDF military intelligence for 25 years, specializing in the Arab political discourse, Arab mass media, Islamic groups, and the Syrian domestic arena. Thoroughly familiar with the Arab media in real time, he's frequently interviewed on various news programs in Israel. The essence of this column is that ISIS is on the ropes, and they're facing grave difficulties recruiting. Here is how Kedar begins. Recent military developments in Mosul, Iraq, and Aleppo, Syria, highlight the mounting successes of both those regimes and their armed forces backed by outside powers. In contrast, the Syrian rebels and ISIS in Iran are in significant retreat. Rumors, possibly planted as psychological warfare, report an emerging coalition of forces that will invade Raqqa, capital city of Islamic State, and bring it back under Syria's wings. Kedar then lays out his thesis, which is extremely cogent. He explains why ISIS will fall. If the increased outside aid continues for another few months, we will witness the return of the central government in both these countries to active control over the areas torn from its grasp over the past 2 years. The big question is, what happens to the thousands of Islamic State fighters after its defeat? Little attention is being afforded that question in the West, where the defeat of Islamic State and its breakup are seen as the most important missions right now to be accomplished before ISIS manages to enlist more and more jihadists to its cause and before it can export its ideology and activities, especially those threatening the connection between the heads and necks of Shiites, Yazidis, Christians, Alawites, Druze, and Jews, its preferred victims. What happened to the thousands of IS fighters, is what happened 15 years ago to the earlier version of the avant-garde jihadism, that is Al-Qaeda. On October 7, 2001, less than a month after 9/11, the war began against Mullah-led Afghanistan, which had become Al-Qaeda's host state, home to its hundreds of terrorist bases and its own institutions, schools and prisons. During the war, the wide-ranging infrastructure of Al-Qaeda was destroyed. Its leaders went into hiding, and its thousands of jihadists were either killed, escaped to wherever possible, or were caught by the coalition forces and sent to Guantanamo Bay. And now he suggests that ISIS will follow suit. They do not have many choices. What is happening will continue to happen to the Islamic State jihadists will be quite similar. Those who elect to be put on trial will remain alive. Those who fight may even reach paradise. And those who surrender have sons who will continue the jihad against the West. At this very time, there is already a conflict between jihadist groups in Libya who are products of the Islamic State. And these conflicts may soon turn into open warfare between different organizations. But Kedar says that Europe is very different, and unfortunately Europe is suffering. Listen to how Kedar puts it. However, there is another group of fighters who will return to Europe after an absence of years. They feel that local European arena has been waiting for them and is ready and willing for a counter-revolution to take place so as to save it from the enemy. We have already seen some of the results of this group's struggle in the Paris Triangle on Friday night, November 13, 2015. In his conclusion, Kedar is very hopeful, and I can understand why he lays out a very clear and compelling argument about how ISIS is on the way out. He finalizes, to summarize, let me state that we are in the midst of the process of export of jihadists from the Islamic Revolution to all four corners of the globe, with emphasis on those with Islamic populations, as those residents extend a friendly, welcoming environment to jihadists, provide them with easy access to ways of enlisting more militants, and offer available shelter in case government law enforcers look for suspects. Some tens of Muslims with Israeli identity cards reached Islamic State over the past 5 years. We would like to think that the authorities are aware of the problem and are prepared to act in a way that will keep democracy not only in name, but also in action. A spectacular analysis. I hope it becomes truth. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 3 cartoons today around the theme of Donald Trump's red hat. His red hat is ubiquitous. It's a symbol, and it's seen all over the world. The first cartoon is called Putin and Trump Favor, and it was drawn by Dave Granlund and published in politicalcartoons.com on December 16th, 2016. Putin is wearing Trump's red hat, only instead of it reading Make America Great Again, it reads Make Alaska Russian Again. And the caption is a thought in Putin's mind saying, how Trump can return the favor. This cartoon is clearly referencing the Russian computer hack. The second cartoon is entitled Putin and Elections USA. It's drawn by Tom Jansen from the Netherlands and was published on December 15, 2016. Putin has his arms crossed, and he's wearing the Trump hat, and that hat reads its normal message, Make America Great Again. The image has Putin looking extremely stern and intimidating. By the way, it's not a very good likeness to Putin, but it is he. The third cartoon, on this theme at least, is also from the Netherlands and is called Trump Conflict of Interest and is by Scott de Volkskrant, published on December 13th, 2016. Trump is wearing 4 hats in 4 different colors. In the background is the US flag. The first hat reads, Make America Great Again. The second hat reads, Make Trump Inc. Great Again. The third hat reads, Make Goldman Sachs Great Again. And the fourth hat reads, Make Exxon Great Again. It's a wonderful play on the expression, and it makes fun of the Trump cabinet and his appointments as well as his success. The fourth cartoon is our final cartoon. It's by Dana Summers and was published in the Tribune Content Agency in December 2016. It's not about hats. This cartoon simply makes fun of the entire situation of the Trump-Obama foreign policy. Obama talks to Iran and creates the infamous New Deal and makes friends and reestablishes relations with Castro and Cuba. No one says a word. When Trump speaks to the Taiwanese president, people go wacko. In a moment, my own perspective and a few predictions. When the suicide bomber murdered 24 Christians and wounded almost another 50 in attendance at the Marx Christian Cathedral in Egypt, the suicide bomber was a 22-year-old named Muhammad Mustafa. ISIS claimed responsibility. Now, this was a terrible attack. Thankfully, this time, the Western world paid attention to it. Western press actually covered the terror attack against Egypt's Coptic Christians. The plight of Christians who were reportedly attacked by Muslims in Egypt and other parts of the Middle East has been ignored for so long. They are tragedies. At best, they're simply ignored. At other times, they're even justified. Christians are being targeted by ISIS and other Islamic extremists throughout the Middle East. Not to see this is not to understand ISIS and not to understand the Middle East. Assad of Syria was interviewed by Portuguese TV the other day. The president of Syria explained that he is hopeful about Trump's presidency and his Middle East policy. He also suggested that Putin and Trump will be great allies. Assad said that if Trump is committed to fighting terror, he will be great for Syria. Quote, "We cannot tell anything about what he's going to do, but if he's going to fight the terrorists, of course, we are going to be natural ally in that regard with Russia, with the Iranian, with many other countries," he told the Portuguese RTP state television. Quote, "Trump's statements were clear during his campaign in relation to fighting terrorism, non-intervention against states in order to depose governments, as the United States has been doing for decades. This is good, but this depends on Trump's will to carry on with his approach and his ability to do that," unquote. Assad is commenting on Trump and Putin has no foundation in reality or in the value, except it shows us what Assad is thinking. Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Microsoft are all collaborating to fight extremism. A message went out saying that they will all share information through a central database of sites and material that they have hashed as problematic. Hashing is the term used to describe a computer additive that the tech companies attach to problematic sites, videos, images, and activities and discussions. They will all go into a shared industry database so that once caught, the extremists cannot reinvent themselves on another platform. This is a major step forward because those tech gurus have been seriously criticized for not doing enough in combating extremism and sometimes for not even acting against terror and extremism at all. This collaborative effort will really help. This is an important and very positive step. We've been thinking about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one picante piece of information. Speaking of Trump's red baseball cap, did you know the Yiddish word for kippah, yarmulke, is of unknown derivation? Kippah, the Hebrew word, comes from the Yiddish kappel, also in German, for hat. There is a serious rabbinic debate as to whether a kippah must be worn at all times. Maimonides says the kippah must only be worn during prayer. The Taz, also known as Rabbi David Halevi Siegel, wrote in the 1600s that the kippah is worn for Kiddushat Hashem, to sanctify God's name. The Chidah wrote that the kippah is worn to ensure piety. Rav Ovadia Yosef, the former chief rabbi of Israel, wrote that one wears it for the affiliation to show that you're part of a Jewish community. The Talmud in Tractate Shabbat 156b says that you should cover your head so that you fear the heaven be upon you. Rav Huna, in the Talmud of Kiddushin 31a, says that one should not walk 4 cubits, about 6 feet, with their head uncovered. The Mishnah Berurah extends the obligation to wearing a kippah inside for even less than 4 cubits. During the Middle Ages, Jews wore a Jewish cap, like today's magician's cap or Merlin's hat. In Islam, that hat is called a taqiyya, which simply means cap. And in Catholicism, it's called in Latin zucchetto, which means a little gourd or a little pumpkin, because it was shaped like half of a pumpkin. Cardinals wear a red one, bishops wear a purple one, and of course the Pope wears a white one. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.